Hi, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 16 of SteamLUG Cast. We're recording this on the 8th of August, 2014. My name is Cheese, and with me I have Namoda.
Hey there.
Mim.
Hello.
And special guest, JP LeBreton from Double Fine.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us. How's everybody been lately?
Good here.
Quiet.
I'm well, thank you.
So before we dive into the show, what have people been playing lately? Mim, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm supposed to be doing my PhD. My deadline's creeping up, so I've only managed to play a few games. Mostly Don't Starve, actually. Thought I'd get back into that a little bit, and then, of course, once I start, I can't stop. I'm afraid of, losing where I'm up to and not knowing what's going on, so that one. Also, Cheese woke me up at 3:30 this morning and was like, come on the cast. And I went, oh my god, JP, I better play the Cave. So I was playing the Cave this morning, just to brush up. And also a little bit of Alien Swarm, which is not on Linux, but, please, guys, feel free. Bring it across. Okay.
How about you, Namoda?
Been playing a bit of Spacebase DF-9, and I played some of this new game Pulsar, and it's still pretty early, but it's promising. And of course, Guns of Icarus Online.
Yeah, cool. How much Pulsar have you played?
We just played a couple games, but yeah, it's still really early. I had some troubles hosting with Linux, but the concept is still really cool, and it's got a good grounding.
Yeah, it feels like it's got a lot of promise. I haven't had a chance to play the latest update, but they added scanning or something in, I think.
Yeah.
And what about you, JP?
I haven't had a whole lot of time for games recently. That's something that just every game developer says. But most recently I played some of Lovely Planet, which is a first-person game with a very kind of Katamari Damacy, Keita Takahashi aesthetic. And it's basically about speedrunning these levels. So it's cool. It's fun, and it has cool music. And it's really hard, so I've enjoyed that. I guess I've also played a few different Doom levels and stuff. I play some of what comes in the new uploads section of Doom World off and on. And aside from that, I've just been playing a lot of Space Base because we're working on Alpha 6.
Awesome.
Cheese, what have you been playing?
I've been was testing the Orbital Gear beta, but that's just launched on Steam, so I guess I've been playing that as well. Alien Swarm, of course, with you. The Maker's Eden was released recently, so I spent a little bit of time in that. Guns of Icarus Online, of course. Working on the Fall a little. Playing some Don't Starve, Mark of the Ninja, Necrodancer, and something else that's yet to be announced.
Ooh, secretive.
Yeah. Mark of the Ninja is kind of sweet. I hadn't played it before. I'd heard good things about it, but I just never really had the time to dig into it. But I really enjoy the mechanics. It seems really solid. So before we move on to our normal show content, we're just going to have a bit of a chat with our special guest, JP. JP, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, sure. I live in San Francisco, and I work at Double Fine. And I guess I've been making games professionally for over 14 years at this point, which is a little terrifying. I was looking back, some friends of mine and former 2K Marin compadres on Twitter were making lists of all the games that they had worked on, things that shipped, but also games that didn't ship or that they were only a little bit involved with and whatever. So I was like, yeah, I should do that myself because I love compiling exhaustive lists and digging back through memory. So you can kind of see what I've been involved with there. I worked at Human Head Studios for 3 years at the beginning of my career, and then I moved to Boston. I worked at Blue Fang Games recently. Briefly, not recently. That's one of the studios that is sadly no longer with us. And then I went to Irrational and worked on the first BioShock game, where I was a level designer. And then I moved out to the Bay Area to be a part of the foundation of 2K Marin, the studio that shipped BioShock 2 and later XCOM: The Bureau. And I left partway through XCOM to come to Double Fine, which is where I am now. And yeah, so I think, I guess I've been programming games in my spare time, just doing little indie games and learning as much as I can and trying to make things that are cool enough to release for about 10 years now. So, yeah.
That's very cool. So, you worked on new XCOM. Had you previously played or been into old XCOM?
Yeah. To be clear, I worked on the first and later third-person shooter XCOM: The Bureau game. It was not
right.
for Access Games rebirth of the original turn-based XCOM game. That said, yes, XCOM, the original XCOM UFO Defense, or I guess it was called Enemy Unknown outside the U.S. That was definitely back in the early 90s when it came out. That was definitely a formative game for me. It's turn-based and has a lot of cool, emergent storytelling mechanics and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, and I haven't actually played nearly as much of the new one that as I would have liked to. But now that it's out on Linux, I'm really looking forward to spending more time with it. Just rebooting for a game like that where you just log these long sessions, not having to reboot into Windows, which I do, partly for work and stuff. Anyway, yeah, XCOM is a very, it's definitely an important game for me.
Yeah, cool. Do you get to have much of a go of Massive Chalice, either in your own time or during the HOFs?
Yeah, I have been able to play it during HOFs, and I missed. We had an internal playtest of it last week, but I was out of town. So yeah, I am absolutely going to be sitting down with Massive Chalice soon. And yeah, it's really awesome to see an XCOM-like game in development within the studio. The team on that is really smart and talented, and they're approaching it very reverently, but also with bringing a lot of creativity and new ideas to that style of game. So I'm really excited for Massive Chalice.
Yeah, same here. So you mentioned that you're a Linux user. What distro do you use?
I use Ubuntu. I think I switched from Windows to Linux in about 2006, so I guess about 8 years now. But yeah, I just use Ubuntu, just usually latest version,
Have you tried many of the various distributions, or you just picked that and that seemed good for you?
I've mainly just used Ubuntu, although I've tinkered around with a lot of different desktop environments and window managers over the years. And I guess I tried KDE for a while. I used the awesome tiling window manager. So, I definitely enjoy tinkering around with that kind of stuff. And if I don't know, and yeah, I've contemplated switching to Arch Linux maybe and trying out that more lower level kind of side of things just for what I would learn and all that, but I haven't really had the guts or more importantly the time to recently.
And how did you find the transition? I mean, in 2006 was sort of about the time that the fast release distros started to become a thing. So stuff started to get a little bit more accessible than it used to be. Easier to install current versions of software and stuff. But how did you find the transition from both from a user sense and a developer sense and a gamer perspective as well, I guess?
Yeah, I guess the first version of Ubuntu I used would have been Dapper Drake, I guess, 606 or whatever. And yeah, I kind of switched over to using it. I installed it from a live CD, so definitely the ease of installation and trying it was a huge part of what got me to even, I'd been interested in tinkering with it, and then I was like, oh, I just have to burn a CD and then I can try it out. And then I tried it out, and then I was like, oh, I can install, if I clear off a little partition on my hard drive, I can install this. And then I kind of reached a point where I realized that I could just do most of what I do on a computer at the time, I think I was just playing a lot of stuff on emulators and Doom and stuff, so only having to occasionally reboot for a system like a AAA game that does not have a Linux port. And that's still kind of where I'm at, I definitely still dual boot, and obviously at work we use Windows mainly. Windows is our main thing for development. But yeah, I just kind of realized that, and yeah, Linux was definitely you had to fiddle with it more to get everything working back in 2006. But even then, they were making it pretty easy to, if you wanted to play an MP3 file, for instance, that was around the point where they were really smoothing that stuff out and making it very easy to start, to get up and running and have all the things that you would expect on another operating system.
It's funny, 2006 was when I stopped using Windows at all. That's when I stopped dual booting. So it seems like so long ago, What do you think are the most notable things that have changed between now and then in terms of the experience that you get as a user who might be switching across?
As a user who's switching, it's hard to say, actually. Like, the landscape is really, I think that, like, obviously, Unity and Steam and Valve both making a big bet on Linux. Those were obviously really huge, and I had been following those efforts, back when Unity Linux support was just a forum thread that people kept posting to, kind of in some cases being annoying, but it was like clearly something that a lot of people wanted. When I'm thinking about like how to make the world or the computing landscape or the game development landscape be a little bit more like what I would like it to be like, I always look for the discussions that are happening around, okay, well, yeah, what are the things that would really benefit a large number of people, and where are the discussions around those things happening, and is there anything like that me being a random forum user or a person who can report bugs or, contribute in whatever way. And so, yeah, like those things eventually did go from being a few fringe people posting like, it used to be kind of a fringe thing where you would see somebody asking about Linux support for a game or a piece of software on a forum, whereas now it feels pretty normal, really. You go into most Steam forums or something, and if a game doesn't have a Linux port, you'll see people asking about it and all that. So I think that's really cool. And I think, those two big companies making a big bet, I think, are probably, I am hoping, are viewed 10 years from now as a huge turning point for Linux because, despite what people who aren't as plugged into gaming in the technology and Linux world may think, I think games are a huge driver for adoption, and I think Linux did in some circles or whatever, people probably did sort of dismiss games to their detriment, because there's this. Sometimes you'll see in discussions like, oh, well, games are frivolous, they're a waste of time, so we don't really, Linux can become viable without supporting games, whereas I don't really think that's the case. Like there was that statistic back when Doom came out that, Microsoft was doing research about how many, like, what applications are people running on MS-DOS and stuff, and behind Microsoft's official applications was Doom. Doom was installed on like a huge percentage of computers. So I think there's a really strong correlation with the market share that an operating system has and its support for games. Now, obviously, that hasn't catapulted Linux in terms of market share. Its market share has been growing steadily, but is still pretty low. But I think it's all about tipping points these days, and I think at some point, I don't know, there's a lot of other pieces that would need to fall into place, but I think Linux, that a tipping point is possible. And it's interesting to think about like what would help bring it past that tipping point.
I think what's really exciting too is not just the amount of users that are gamers or that would want to game on the platform, but on the technical side, improvements to drivers and video and audio and everything that goes into making a game that Linux will benefit so hugely from having more people develop for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing is, like, in terms of mind share, not necessarily market share, I guess, but definitely mind share, is that gamers are usually power users, and they're the people that other people go to ask questions when deciding what they want to use or what they want to buy, or when they have problems and stuff. And so people are usually going to end up, following those more advanced users and emulating what they use, just because that's easier to be supported by people that and it feels like that is going to have the presence of games is going to have a big significant knock-on effect in that respect as well.
Yeah, definitely, I think so.
So you also run a couple of open source projects, or have released a number of projects under open source licenses. Interested in telling us a little bit about a couple of those?
Yeah, sure. I think I've just, even before I switched to Linux, I was realizing that open source is potentially a really good way of, practicing democratic development of things. I followed Firefox, I think, was probably my gateway into open source. And then, but yeah, I guess the first real public indie project that I was developing was a first-person abstract shooter game called Purity that used the open source version of the Quake 3 engine. And I submitted a build of that to the IGF back in 2008, right as the indie, there was sort of an indie renaissance going on and around that time. And yeah, since then, I've just kind of had a public code repository where any sort of prototypes or tinkering that I'm doing on a game idea, I just put that up, because it's really like, I don't necessarily believe that any of the ideas that I have constitute some big competitive advantage that I would want to keep secret from other people lest they steal it. So I've really just kind of defaulted to developing ideas out in the open and putting up my code, because even though I'm not an amazing programmer by any stretch, I don't know, like the benefits of having other people able to read your code and learn from it, because they might just be starting out or something. So it's just, nowadays it's very easy to do. Also, just a lot of source control things being publicly hosted, so it's almost more effort to take something private and keep your source code hidden than it is to make it public. So, but yeah, and so other projects, I guess, Cheese just posted a link to my Bitbucket account, which is where I'm using Mercurial and putting a lot of my stuff up there. Lately, like in the past 6 months to a year, I've gotten kind of addicted to making Twitter bots, some of which are like old video game references, and other ones, I don't know, are just really just kind of net art sort of projects, if that's still a term. But it's just something that's fun to tinker with, and it's sort of an easier hobby to justify as someone who is leading a game development project for their day job. It's an easier hobby to justify than doing hobby development, than making a game in my spare time, because some of those Linux bots only, Twitter bots only took a few hours to develop, start to finish. I think the longest one maybe took me like a day or two of off and on hacking. So it's a very easy and fun kind of thing to dabble in without committing to larger scale game development. So yeah, that's been a spare time thing.
So one of the Twitter bots that you run is the SteamDB Linux bot, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And to be clear, the SteamDB, like the folks running that, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just, found SteamDB and realized that it was a great way of tracking, and I would check their Linux page periodically, just to look for new games and stuff, because there's a few games that still don't have Linux ports that I'm really jazzed for, and I was like, I could probably automate tracking this, and if I could with like a little Python script or something, and if I'm automating it, then I might as well make it publicly automated. And I realized that a Twitter bot would be a pretty good way to do that, so I created the SteamDB Linux Twitter bot, which again is not affiliated with the awesome work that the creators and maintainers of SteamDB are doing, but it's just something I made for my own purposes. So I'm still waiting for it's just so that I can get a little Twitter someday that will say new game Spelunky, because that is one of the games that I'm really hoping gets a Linux port at some point. So yeah, just laziness is a programmer virtue, so just automating that sort of checking thing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We actually have a little bit of overlap with the SteamDB community. I was kind of hoping that Alram or Export would be in here, and we could unmute them and invite them to share their perspectives. But on that note, I mean, what kind of role do you feel that SteamDB plays for Linux gamers? Like, it seems to be something that a lot of us keep a very close eye to and gravitate towards.
Yeah, it seems like just a really valuable information resource. It's always been kind of interesting that Valve has made that that information, that they've made no special effort to keep it secret. I think it makes
Yeah.
sense. Because there's still ways that obviously you can keep a game, the existence of a game on Steam secret. But yeah, no, I think it's just a really cool, valuable resource. And I don't know. Yeah, it's
I know for some of us who end up interacting with developers that information that's exposed on SteamDB can sometimes help us overcome, publishing problems that people have encountered during the early launch of Steam for Linux. So missing configs and missing launch options, or that sort of stuff. It's been nice to have a resource there that we can fall back on to try and get a clearer picture of what's going on under the hood.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, it's basically, it's also partly a QA resource. I noticed, I made a small fix to Spacebase once when I noticed that the game status was listed as game works, but no Linux icon. And I was like, oh, that's right. It needs that zip with like the different sized PNG images in case you want a desktop shortcut. And so I just whipped that up real quickly, and then committed that to the depot, and so now, it, yeah, yep.
It's funny, in the early days, back when there were much fewer titles, or far fewer titles, we used to make special effort to try and reach out to developers and remind them about that stuff, and it was a bit of an effort to get anybody to actually do anything about it. But these days, it's just the number of games being released, is increasing, and it's hard to keep on top of that. But it's cool that some developers are keeping an eye on it themselves.
It might just, I have no idea who else keeps an eye on it on the development side. It's really just me being like, oh,
We can pretend.
there's a tiny flaw with our Linux support. So I mean, obviously it's an early access game, so there are other bugs that we very much want to fix. But that was something that stuck out like a little splinter in the database. So I was like, this would take me 5 minutes to fix. So I did.
So moving on to maybe chat about Double Fine. You said you started there in 2011. How do you think things have changed since you've been there?
I think the studio's been in this ongoing process of change. I mean, I started in July of 2011, and that was before we had done a public Amnesia Fortnight. That was before the big Kickstarter for Broken Age. I think, and the Cave was a relatively traditional publishing deal. That was my first project at Double Fine, and that was really kind of continuing in the same sort of business model and development approach that we had used for Costume Quest and Stacking and Iron Brigade, etc. And then, I think we had we did an Amnesia Fortnight in 2011. That was, I guess, the last private one that we did. I think the Kickstarter changed a lot. That was March of 2012. Because that broke a lot of records and got Kickstarter on a lot of people's radar in games. There had been successful Kickstarters for games before ours, obviously, but it definitely kind of increased the visibility because of how much money it made, and that it was this. I don't know. I mean, it was a really amazing thing to be a part of, seeing such an outpouring of fan affection, and and also seeing that money come from somewhere that we had just previously not considered a place where you could really fund a game. And then we did later that year, we did the first public Amnesia Fortnight, and that was an amazing and bizarre experience, and one of my projects getting picked. That was pretty astonishing as well. And I think it's, I think that was sort of I think that whole year has really been kind of another turning point for the studio. Just because, we've realized that we have several different ways that we could be funding games, and several different ways that we can be making games, and different scopes for those. And it's just really exciting. We've got a lot of options, and we're always weighing what the best move for the studio is, and what the best way we can communicate with our audiences and all that kind of stuff. So, we're just learning all the time, like a lot of studios. We're learning all the time and just trying to be open and honest. And hopefully we're getting better over time, and we're going to continue making games and get better and better at it. So, yeah.
I found it really, really interesting to observe. Like, Double Fine wasn't significantly on my radar before the crowdfunding campaign, mostly because there was no Linux support, but also because, initially there were console-only titles, and I don't have any consoles, so it's just something that I don't pay much attention to. But being able to watch the evolution of community engagement and the willingness to I guess be courageous and try new things is really inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, thinking back, like talking about, all these different dynamics that help Linux reach a tipping point and stuff, there was, the Kickstarter, like we were able to promise Linux and Mac support for Broken Age on the Kickstarter pretty easily. Like I think it was a stretch goal or something. It was like, okay, well, yeah, if we make more than a little bit of money, then it's pretty easy. Because of the tech we had decided to use, the Moai engine, it was like, okay, well, yeah, these supporting the 3 major PC platforms is pretty easy, so let's just do that. And then also, obviously the Humble Bundle being this thing that at that point had actually it might not have been a stretch goal. I might have just been something that we were like, hey, this is we're comfortable committing to this. But between that and the Humble Bundles,
I think that's a better way to present it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like it was, at some point we just shifted over to thinking of it and to thinking of PC in terms of Windows, Mac, and Linux, because those 3 platforms are similar enough that if we've got our technology working right, then it's pretty easy to, develop primarily on Windows, but then port to those other 2 platforms really easily. And I don't know, I think that's been another, like big part of our strategy as a studio is being on all of the platforms where it makes sense to, and even trying out different platforms, just to see where the people who are interested in our games are and where we can make money and all that kind of stuff. So.
It also feels like the Broken Age or the Double Fine Adventure crowdfunding campaign was, in addition to increasing the visibility of Kickstarter, it felt like it helped increase the visibility of Linux audiences being willing to pay money to support development of titles like that.
Yeah, I think so. Because I remember, like about a month or 2 later, the Wasteland 2 Kickstarter went up, and they made Linux a more explicit part of their Kickstarter proposition to people. I remember they were saying like, oh yeah, we're in touch with Unity's engineers, and they're gonna do. I think maybe the news of Unity support, Linux support for Unity was just now coming about or something. Yeah, and I think some other programmers contributed to the support. It's unclear, but yeah, I think that was like, I mean, that's another thing is like there's not a single tipping point. Sometimes there's like multiple tipping points, and I think around that half-year period when it was becoming clear that Valve was going to support Linux and Unity was going to be on Linux, and these other Kickstarters were getting in, and because some of them were using Unity or they were, it was relatively easy for them to do so. Yeah, I feel like it did, like there was a lot of mind share gained, if not market share, during that time. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, it's a really positive move forward, I think. So you mentioned that like you constantly, or Double Fine is constantly learning from stuff and trying new things. It feels like the community's not that aware of the level of concurrency that goes on at Double Fine. I mean, there are a whole bunch of projects going on at once. Do you feel like that's something that the community understands?
Yeah, we definitely do have a lot of projects going on at once. And yeah, I don't think we've tried to make that clear to people, because I think anytime we announce a new project, there's always there's some group of commenters or something who are like confused because they think that we're stopping working on another project. And that's basically never the case. I mean, people do shift between projects as needed, like, Costume Quest 2 is, shooting to ship, in time for Halloween this year, obviously. And so, that's getting, some people, but, yeah, like there's a lot of different projects that we've got going on. So, like, yeah, I think we could maybe do a better job of messaging it, but it's also just something that doesn't, like, I would love it if there was just a more general level of education among people, who are following game development, that it's like, yeah, studio can have multiple projects, and a lot of times, that means that it's entirely separate groups of people working entirely in parallel. Sometimes it's more complicated. But yeah.
Are you in a position to say how many titles or how many separate projects are being worked on at Double Fine at the moment?
I probably shouldn't, just because, I don't know, somebody might be able to. I don't know. It's not, the only reason that we keep anything a secret is because it will be a more fun surprise later when we surprise people with it than if we just start talking about it from day one. I mean, there's pros and cons to that approach, obviously, but yeah, it also gets a little complicated just because we've got ports going. It's like, okay, well, this game is shipping on this number of platforms, so it's like, and then we've got ports of older games. Maybe I forget at this point, because over the years I remember following like, oh yeah, somebody's like one or two programmers are working on porting Costume Quest to iOS. And that was actually cool because it meant that was the first time that we had ported our Buddha engine over to a mobile platform, period. So that also kind of paved the way for Android support and OpenGL ES support and just all these technical things that we're keeping track of so that we can target the platforms that are going to be good for us. So
yeah, cool. It'd be. I mean, I don't know whether or not there are. Actually, I probably shouldn't bring it up, but I was going to mention Iron Brigade and the Games for Windows Live situation with that, but I don't know what the situation is, and it's probably not something you can talk about.
Yeah, I don't think I can talk about it. I don't know entirely what it is myself, just because other people at the studio, would know what the story with that is. But yeah, I think that's one of those things that there's a political dimension to it, and I don't want to go near it. I would love to see the game on minus Games for Windows Live and on different platforms, but yeah, I have no idea what the status of that is. So
I think it's not playable at the moment. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Oh gosh, really? Is it right? Because Games for Windows Live is still running, right? They kind of extended its life support or something. It's a mess. It's sad. Like yeah, like I picked up Dark Souls on in a sale recently just because I figured I should finally play it, and just launching a game and then being immediately confronted with that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to turn this into bag on Games for Windows Live. It's just kind of it's
it's hard enough for them as it is.
Yeah.
So maybe moving on to the Cave briefly. How was that as a first project at Double Fine? Was it daunting to work with Ron and the other people who worked on the game? Because did you slip straight into a lead design role there?
Yeah, I guess so. I was the designer on the project. Ron was the project lead and sort of creative director on it, and I was really like the only full-time designer. I guess I was one of the first designers that Double Fine had hired in a while there. Yeah, it was a little daunting just because like knowing that I was going to work with the creator of a game that I had played when I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something, way back in the day. But I don't know, like Ron is extremely unassuming,
such a nice guy.
Yeah, an incredibly nice guy, and working with him was a real pleasure. So it really just it was daunting in the way that starting at a new company and starting on a new project is, where it's like, okay, I have to learn I have to learn how to work with people, like just get a feel for everybody's style of working and find out what people are really good at and figure out good ways of working together. So it was daunting in that respect, but in every other, also, yeah, I hadn't worked on a platformer before. I hadn't really worked on an adventure game before. So that was, that was daunting for different reasons. I had been working on action games for a long time.
Do you feel that it came out well? Are there aspects of its adventure gaminess that you think would be refined if you had a chance to do it again?
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm very proud of the work that we did on it. As far as like how it will be judged by history or what other people think of it, I'm always pretty in the dark about that. Because my perspective is someone is that of someone who just worked on it and from the start. But like a lot of the things that I would change about it are just like small fixes and stuff. There's like a few small changes that we probably could have made that would have significantly reduced the amount of backtracking across sections of a single area. That would have that I feel like probably would have assuaged a lot of people's gripes about like, oh yeah, there's too much backtracking or walking around in the game. But I don't know. I mean, those are kind of local maxima rather, for how to fix the type of game that we shipped. As far as like higher level discussion, like decisions about like what kind of game it ended up being and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's another thing that any game developer with any ability to analyze their own work will probably, be able to go on for days about like, yeah, if we had done this kind of thing, it would have been this kind of thing. But I don't know. It's hard to say what those parallel universe versions of that game or any other game would have been. But I don't know. Yeah, like I said, I'm really happy to have ended up at Double Fine and to have gotten the chance to work on that project, and I'm proud of the work that we did. I learned a lot, and yeah.
I really like the game. The only thing I kind of feel makes it harder to enjoy playing it over and over again is that the ratio of character specific stuff to character generic stuff is quite low. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you're going to be playing again over and over again if you want to play every single character.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I totally agree. Yeah.
That mine guy never gets old though. He's totally awesome.
I love him.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad he has some fans.
He deserves his own spin-off game.
Yeah, could he be in the Cave 2 maybe?
No comment.
No. And the clown. Oh, it should be a prequel.
Gosh, that clown.
Oh yeah.
Do you know whose joke that was?
Which? The nose honking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget who exactly came up with that, but it was definitely late in development and just something that I did the Lewis scripting for it. Yeah, it might have just been like Ron and I were talking about it and like, hey, this would be a funny thing that would be completely trivial to add. So yeah, that's.
I love the way that the way that I've seen people talk about it is there'll be someone who hasn't played the game before, and someone will tell them to do it, not tell them what it does, and they'll have this, oh, I'm clicking something, it's interesting, it's going to be a great Easter egg, and then suddenly they feel dirty.
Yeah. Yep.
So, Amnesia Fortnite stuff we mentioned earlier. You pitched Spacebase DF-9 last year?
2012. It would have been like November, December 2012.
At the time, did you expect that it would grow into what it's become today?
I really had no idea. I was just, at the time, I was just thinking this is something that would be cool to work on. I had definitely been thinking it would be cool if Double Fine made some games that are more mechanics driven, and yeah, it was something that I was almost planning to tinker with it. Yeah, I had been tinkering with it as a little prototype in my spare time, and then I was like, I should probably pitch this to Tim. And this was before I knew about that Amnesia Fortnite that year was going to be public. And then just kind of okay, well, I guess we're doing these video pitches for it, put one of those together, and then it just kind of snowballed from there, as things usually do.
So you mentioned some of your inspirations for the game were like Dwarf Fortress and things like that. Have you put much time into those games, or is it just kind of incidental, or what?
Yeah, I've definitely put time into Dwarf Fortress off and on over the years. It's not lately. I haven't the new update that happened recently. Yeah, I'm not a high level expert who does let's plays of an amazing fortress with magma traps and all that kind of stuff. But I've played it enough to kind of get a sense for what's possible and what's interesting about it and all that. It is definitely harsh. The harshness I don't mind really, but the the interface is kind of the classic complaint with that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. there definitely seems like some low-hanging fruit there, that the game could be made significantly more usable. But it also, Tarn gives such a clear window into what his development process is like. So I can definitely see why there's always these things competing for dev priority and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite games. I probably played it way too much, but it's just really interesting because it seems like no other developers are really pushing that angle of world generation over, just the mechanics of just playing, the end result.
Yeah, definitely. A few projects, like Ultima Ratio Regum, if that's how you pronounce it, is a pretty interesting game that is in development, and that's very Dwarf Fortress-like in that it's ASCII, but it takes place in a different setting and looks like it's going to have very different mechanics. It also has more of a visual bent, like there are like these close-up images that are still done in ASCII, but I don't know. So that's definitely one that I'm interested in. And then there's these kind of Dwarf Fortress, kind of inspired games like Prison Architect and Tynan Sylvester's RimWorld, and Space Base, obviously, and so there's and I guess No Moria and Towns and other games like that. So the space is definitely getting more and more explored. But for a while, Dwarf Fortress really was just kind of a complete outlier. There was nothing really very much like it at all, aside from roguelikes, I guess, which eschew the entire management aspect of it.
Yeah, I looked at a lot of those games, and they all seem to be trying to copy kind of the mechanics of a sim environment of managing people like that, but they don't go back into the history of where those creatures or whatever come from. They're just kind of spawned instantly, and then you deal with it. And I feel like that's really missing in a lot of these games.
Yeah, the world gen, it's almost, you can almost think of it as a competitive advantage that Dwarf Fortress has. Like it's been so long in development, and it's like the development is clearly very interested in that world generation stuff. It's something that, would be, if you were thinking with a more conventional game development mindset, would be kind of hard to justify. Like, you're doing all of this stuff to generate things, whereas you could just sort of, do a shorter and more to the point version, which I think is what, something like RimWorld maybe is doing.
Yeah.
But it's also like clearly like it reads as the product of this personal obsession in Dwarf Fortress, and you just kind of marvel at the complexity of it. It's a very weird piece of game development, honestly, and I think that's one reason that it's in a museum right now, because it's just so singular and unique.
Yeah.
So in terms of Space Base being still in development, what do you see as being the big areas for improvement to bring the game to where you would see, where you would be comfortable saying these are the mechanics of a final game?
Yeah, the two really big ones that are obviously very much in the plan are a tutorial sort of thing, not like a super handholdy tutorial, but just something that makes it, because right now the beginning of I've watched a lot of people at this point play the beginning of the game, starting a new base from scratch with 3 people floating in space and having to build everything from the ground up, so to speak. And so yeah, giving people an easier way to learn the game is definitely in the cards. And then the other major thing is definitely giving a more game-like progression to the game, by which I mean really just giving concrete goals for players to shoot for. I think it's always going to be a sandboxy kind of game, but giving people, like in the original SimCity is a sandbox, obviously, but there are still milestones you can shoot for. In SimCity 2000, you can be like, okay, I'm going to get a city full of arcologies, and so that they can launch off into space, because that means that I've gotten a really big population and I've made that viable. So just like a long-term progression and stuff you can work towards, and then you can kind of feel like you've accomplished all of the explicit goals of the game. I think the implicit goals of the game are of like, I want to do this, I want to make a weird base that's full of nothing but cheesenesses and stuff like that. Those goals will obviously always be supported just because they emerge from the sim. But I think tutorial and an overall progression sense with some objectives for the game are two things that definitely need to happen before we take it off early access and make it, a full game that, that feels like a complete end-to-end experience.
I've not had a chance to play it, but I've had a chance to watch Cheeseness play it quite a lot. And it's pretty interesting, some of the stuff that he comes out with. Like, I just hear him shouting, there's no oxygen in this room, why are you working out? Aha! And as far as like a game in development goes, how are people being, like, how's the community being about that kind of, I'm not really sure if it's a bug or if it's just some fantastic random feature of the game that people will just work out to death, Yeah,
I think there's definitely things that happen in the game that are unexpected and weird. But usually, when people are complaining about a bug or something, it's something that is objectively, legitimately broken in the game, or something that could stand to be improved. So and we do pay attention to all of the places where the game is being discussed. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that we're still working on fixing and all that kind of stuff. And we do minor updates in between the major updates to iron out some of those bugs and stuff like that. So
I feel like the random occurrence stuff is something that people end up celebrating a lot. I mean, people absolutely love it when the Sims stuffs up and you end up with heads on backwards or whatever, or they do something completely unexpected that's hilarious. Are you going to? I mean, is there anything that you think that you can do from a development perspective to allow for, these exciting, non-scripted events to happen in the final game?
Yeah, absolutely. We think about that a lot, because there's ways that you can author the game mechanics and the simulation and the AI. And a lot of times that's good practice in other styles of game development, where if you're making a different kind of game, you want to kind of minimize the amount of random weird stuff that can happen, because that makes QA testing easier and makes the play experience more like you want it to be. Whereas thinking about things in terms of, like making it so that emergent things can happen, they're not breaking everything, but we've also just sort of allowed things to happen that don't necessarily, contribute to this perfect, smoothly functioning thing. In Dwarf Fortress, obviously, like having people wander around collecting wheels of cheese and then dropping them in the Great Hall or something, like that's something that, maybe that is a bug, if that's happening all the time or something that's bad and you want to fix that. But yeah, it's tough though, because yeah, you're kind of trying to bottle, like there's hilarious bugs that come up sometime during game development, and you end up fixing them even though they are kind of entertaining, because you're like, if there was a way that we could just put this bug in a little jar for people to display, then we kind of would, as like a little Easter egg unlockable sort of thing. But a lot of times, that bug is happening because the code the code that it touches is broken, and you have to, if you don't fix that, then something else is going to go wrong, So it's kind of like, it's kind of like pruning a hedge or making a topiary sculpture or something, because you want some of those strange little accidents to happen, but you also don't want, weeds forming in your nice garden or something.
So this year for Amnesia Fortnight, you pitched Buried Metropolis, which was going to be a roguelike for mobile devices.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Do you think that there's still potentially a future for that project?
I have no idea. I think if I had it to do over again, if I had a little time machine and I had to use it for something strange, I think tying it to mobile, like, there's things that are connected to one. There's things in that idea that were connected to one another, like the fact that you would take it someplace and then it would use the unique fingerprint of the Wi-Fi routers you were near was a pretty key part of how the random world gen for that worked. But it also ended up tying it to mobile platforms, and in a way that I think doomed it probably. I think a lot of people didn't understand that, you don't need to connect to Wi-Fi, or some people just had the very legitimate reason that, like, I'm not going to be I live out in the middle of nowhere, and so I don't have any routers near me, and so I would get very limited value out of this game. So if I had to do it over again, I probably honestly would have just pitched a roguelike that is not in any way tied to mobile stuff. It would have just been, you control it with a gamepad, you play it on Steam, we would put it on consoles if that made any sense. This is nothing. I mean, this is just something that I've thought about. This is not something that's been discussed as a thing or something. But yeah, just I think there's a tremendous amount of interesting game design stuff still to explore in roguelike likes, and I would love to see Double Fine make one. We don't have any plans to right now, but I think that would be a really good bet for the studio. And, I think there's one that we could make that would potentially a lot of people would be interested in. Like a lot of people have played Binding of Isaac. Spelunky has just kept growing and growing as like, a game that people can come back to and stuff. Spelunky is kind of the big one. Like I have a huge amount of admiration for that game's design. And a lot of my thinking about like, oh yeah, this would be a really fun thing to work on came out of that. I mean, it's kind of like the best in class, arguably. So like just wanting to make a game like that is easier said than done. But yeah.
It's like the only game that I regularly fire up Wine to play. It's very cool. I hope that we'll see it on Linux at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Road Metropolis was sadly unsuccessful in the Animation Fortnite voting, but you managed to work on Dear Leader. How did you find that?
That was cool. That was a game concept that I really believed in, and we had some really awesome people on our team. So yeah, I think it turned out pretty well, and I think my role in that was just kind of like design implementation. I guess I did a little bit of the writing. But just helping out here and there, just doing some Lua and making those data tables that would kind of drive the event stuff. But yeah, that was really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, it feels like it'd be a good candidate for a full project as well.
Yeah.
If the opportunity ever arose.
Yeah, I think so.
You mentioned that that at the moment you use Windows for work. If the opportunity to use Linux in the workplace arose, would you take that? Do you see a future where that might happen?
Yes to the first question, definitely. At work, I do a little bit of graphic work here and there as needed. Like I don't do any like of the really beautiful artwork that shows up in Spacebase. That's Jeremy Mitchell, our artist. But yeah, no. Like so mostly I use GIMP and sometimes Krita for doing art stuff, and basically everything. I think everything I use is open source, and has and runs on Linux. So it would be very little difficulty for me to switch to Linux, aside from some of our internal development tools. We use this kind of IDE thing for developing Spacebase called 2HB. After two-headed baby, which is like, it's a Lua IDE that was originally created by Brandon Dillon and our tech team for developing Broken Age, and I think it uses it uses PyQt, I believe, so it's potentially cross-platform, but it uses some other stuff that for communicating between processes or something. It's got some Windows specific stuff in there that wouldn't be like a massive undertaking to take out, I don't think, but it's enough work that it doesn't like that's down on the list of tech investments, because
right.
I don't think it would be very realistic to try to move the entire studio over to Linux or OS X for that matter, just because we've got artists who use a lot of art packages that are either Windows only or Mac and Windows. And I think some people, like a lot of people, probably would just prefer to work in Windows. Like I switched to Linux and use Linux at home partly just because I enjoy, just sort of the feel of using those tools. I mean, when it works well, obviously sometimes when it breaks, it's not much fun, but that's true of any OS. But yeah, other people, they learned how to use a computer like 15, 20 years ago, and they don't really want to have to like relearn a bunch of stuff. And I completely respect that. You've got to give people that choice. But yeah, I mean, I guess if I ever founded my own game studio someday, not that I really have much of an intention to, I would be using Linux, and I would probably make it a priority to make it so that people could in developing whatever kind of games we were making. So. I think it's good. For a lot of things, like for a lot of game development things, it's certainly good enough. I mean, you've got just kind of all the major parts of a software stack you would need for the most part. Like some people are going to have art needs that Linux probably can't serve, but that's getting better. Krita had that really awesome Kickstarter, and it's really I'm really happy to see that tool progressing. GIMP, has been progressing steadily. They've been adding to and stuff. So, I wish they would change their name probably, but so there's good tools that are emerging all the time. So I don't know. It'll continue to get better. But yeah, I don't think Double Fine will switch entirely to Linux anytime soon.
Sure, but it is cool to see that there are tools out there that make it possible for developers considering that, makes it viable, even if it doesn't end up being something that's done, that it's still an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like if I were ever to be a solo indie developer, I would absolutely, I would, be working with my home setup, and that would absolutely be how I would do it. I have no, I get by just fine doing the graphical stuff with the tools I do and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
You mentioned earlier that there were some games that you'd like to see on Linux that that haven't arrived yet. What titles would you like to see ported sooner rather than later?
Trying to think. Yeah, definitely Spelunky with a bullet. Let me check my Steam list here for a moment. I don't know. It's honestly just anything that. Like I was playing some Abyss Odyssey co-op recently, and Ace Team is a pretty cool developer, and I've always liked their games, and they do a good job. So I don't know, I'd love to see their stuff work on Linux. But anytime an indie developer is like, sorry, we have one programmer, and they're used to developing on in Windows, it's like, okay, I completely understand that. I hope that their game does well enough that they can then be like, oh, cool, we can port this to Linux, and get some more money coming in that way. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I think Spelunky is the one that I pretty regularly like. If I could just launch it from my desktop here instead of having to reboot. I guess I don't play it in Wine because I would have to have Steam installed in Wine, and I did that for a while, and it was just kind of a headache. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's been okay for me, but then I haven't used Windows since 2006, so I don't know any different as far as running Steam in Windows goes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I guess if I was going to go cold turkey, then yeah, that would. Yeah, it seems like it works. Wine does seem like it's made, like it's just continually progressed. I only use it when I really have to, because I would always just rather have a native version. But yeah, Wine I use a lot for. Back when the Free Indie Games blog was running, and they would post like a few games a day. And so there would just be a ton of indie games, a lot of which are made with like Game Maker or some other thing. Wine almost always did the trick for that, So I really enjoyed being able to, and they didn't have particularly difficult high system requirements. So, I have a Wine directory that's chock full of just like little indie games that take like, 10, 15, 30 minutes to play through. So, and I would love it if, my wish list is less for individual games and more for game creation platforms. I just wish all of those worked natively on Linux. I wish, Unity, a lot of people are using that, and I wish Unity's development suite for that worked on Linux.
Yeah.
I dabbled with and learned Unity a couple of years ago, but I didn't really get into the regular habit of making stuff with it just because I would, in order to make anything with it, I would either have to run it through Wine, and I don't know how that works. Anyway, yeah, I kind of want, that's why I've been following Unreal Engine 4 actually, just because their community seems really committed to, like, they are working on getting Unreal Ed working on Linux, which is mind blowing because that was an application, I don't know, like that's a very large application, and that represents a pretty significant commitment on their part. So I don't know, yeah, like, Unreal Engine, they've kind of, like, I guess I worked with Unreal Engine professionally for about 10 years, but that they would ever, make a commitment to Linux is pretty surprising to me, and a sign that Epic has changed course in a major way compared to a few years ago. So that's pretty cool to see, actually.
No, the community has done a huge amount of work there, and it's definitely inspiring to see.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm on the fence as to how positive it is when the community's doing Epic's work for them, and it remains to be seen how well maintained the Linux stuff is going to be as Epic's internal developers are working on stuff. But I guess it's good to have hope, and hopefully we'll see stuff, Linux be a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really big and important question. Obviously, I think the best case for community involvement helping get Linux some support for something off the ground is that they do the work that a developer internally would have been kind of reticent to, because like before you've ported your game, an old friend of mine from 2K Marin, David Pittman, who made the game Eldritch. He was like sort of hesitant to port to port his homebrew engine to OS X and Linux for a while, just because he knew that there would be a whole bunch of like not very much fun programming type work and stuff. And then he just kind of bit the bullet at one point and did it. And now, it was pretty easy for him to get his new in development game, Neon Struct, up and running on Linux now, because he had already ported his engine, and just needed to get a few edges sanded off. So, but like a lot of developers, especially when they're looking at limited timetables for their studio or something, they think of that first work that you just kind of have to grit your teeth through, and they're like, I don't want to, like, because even though it might only realistically take a few weeks or something, it would be kind of painful, and it's not the kind of work that a lot of programmers enjoy. Whereas if the community can do that, they're the ones who are very passionate about it and invested in it. So if they can help get pay that cost of entry, then hopefully, ideally, again, this is an ideal scenario, I guess, like the developer can just now then take on stewardship of that and be like, okay, we have stuff to maintain. A lot of the hard work was done for us, but now we just maintain it. And gradually improve it over time. And obviously support is a very real ongoing cost, but it kind of gets you over the hump emotionally or psychologically to doing the work. And then it's just like, okay, cool. It costs us this much to do regular maintenance on the Linux specific part of our code base, but then the Linux versions of our games, account for like 5 or 10 or however much % of our revenue. So this is well worth it to be doing this, even when an occasional pain in the butt surfaces sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's definitely holding the door open, I agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that probably we should wrap up our chat portion of the show. Thanks heaps for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, thanks for doing this cast and running it excellently. And I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Alrighty, so moving on, a quick recap of the past events that we've had since the last show. We had XCOM event following the last cast, which was a bit of fun. People playing a few games here and there. It was good to see. We had a Worms Reloaded event, and we had a Steelstorm Burning Retribution event, which Hero recorded a video of, kindly. We also had our first Mountain Blade event. Nemoda, did you manage to make any of these?
I made the Steelstorm event. I did not make the Mountain Blade event.
Yeah, I didn't manage to get to it either. But I hear that people had fun, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Steelstorm was interesting, playing Capture the Flag. I didn't make it around for the co-op, but I guess somebody recorded some videos of that.
Yeah, I showed up late. People were already playing co-op, but we made it all the way through, and it wraps straight back to the beginning, so you can play again without stopping.
Nice.
But yeah, it was cool, and it was fun. I'd never played with the third-person camera mode before, so it definitely feels like a different game with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, other people commenting on that as well. That it was an interesting experience with that kind of interface to the game. As far as upcoming events go, after the cast, we're going to duck off and play some Trine 2, and then the next day we've got some Team Fortress 2 on the go on the 9th. We're going to start our Portal 2 Community Mapping Challenge on the 15th. We'll make up a forum thread for people to share their stuff. We're also going to have a normal gaming event that's geared towards getting people familiar with the editor. We're going to be joined by Portal Mapper Mevius, who populated the Perpetual Testing Initiative DLC with some maps, so people have probably come across his stuff before. He's hopefully going to offer some advice and inspire people to make some cool stuff, which should be good.
Nice.
And then on the 16th, we've got some Fistful of Frags again, which was a good favourite last time. And of course, we've got our regular Guns of Icarus online events. So on the Steam and Valve news front, there's a recent client update for the beta, which introduces a bunch of new features, as well as a new look and feel. You had a chance to check that out, Namoto?
Yeah, I thought the new theme fit pretty well. Seems a little cleaner, a little easier to read, but I'm sure people that got used to the old one will probably complain about it. But it's not bad.
Yeah, a lot of the rounded corners have disappeared. I find that an interesting move.
I think they're going from kind of a more modern, stylish look to kind of fit their whole SteamOS launch.
Yeah. And of course, there's the ability now to hide games in your game list, which people have been, demanding for donkey's years. And the other big thing is, of course, the Dota 2 update that contains what do they call it, the Dota 2 workshop tools. Is that the official title that it's got?
I believe so.
So that has a new version of Hammer, which has, as I understand it, a built-in preview version, like a built-in version of Dota 2 for previewing your levels and stuff on the fly. And apparently that is running in Source 2.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting to see this kind of, I guess, soft launch approach to getting the tech out there, getting it in the hands of people who are going to potentially not going to have a negative experience from a gaming perspective. It's also interesting to see a Source 1 game using Source 2 tech, and to see that migration, like what kind of doors that opens for developers of Source games. But I think, the disappointing thing at this point, of course, is that it's Windows only. So we still don't have Hammer, and we still don't have the other authoring tools. So hopefully we'll see that stuff make an appearance at some point in the future.
Certainly hope so. We're definitely short on design tools.
Yeah. On to general gaming news. Assault Android Cactus got a large update recently, which features a new Infinity mode, where you just kind of play until you die against wave after wave of enemies, which is a good fit for that kind of gameplay. And it also has new voices for the characters. It's kind of nice to see them gain a lot of character with a bit of acting behind it. Crypt of the Necrodancer launched on Steam Early Access just after our last cast, so anybody who's been holding out for that can now get a hold of it. Their Necrothon event that they had leading up to launch managed to raise, I think it was $25,000 for distributed across 6 charities.
Cool.
Yay.
But it's nice to see the number of people who own that now in my games list. Like as time went on, it was crazy to see how many people got it on their wish list, and then suddenly everybody owns it and has a chance to play it, and realize that it's a game that takes a bit of practice and can be a little bit punishing.
Yeah, I was hoping to see some more people pick it up. I was looking at how many people in SteamLUG had it, and not that many yet, but hopefully a few more look into it.
A bit random, but I just wanted to ask, do you know if the soundtrack is available, or if that comes with the game?
It is not.
Yes.
I read that somewhere, that it's... Did you heard differently?
I thought I spotted the soundtrack on the store. Let me just double check.
So I remember just reading, he had a kind of a Q&A on Reddit, the developer, and they said that the soundtrack is not separately available yet.
There it is.
Oh, okay. Well, it must have changed since that questionnaire went up.
Yeah, it's fairly recent, I think.
Very cool.
But the soundtrack is fantastic. I really like the soundtrack of that game.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, it's got the custom music functionality, and it's disappointing to see anybody not using the default music because it's so good. XCOM Enemy Unknown got the big update that has been on the way, which apparently should improve performance for most users. I haven't had a chance to actually play the game since the patch went live, but it's hopefully is giving people good experiences.
Yeah, I mean, the original one worked pretty well for me, so I didn't have too much issue with it, but that's cool that they're still working on it. So I guess Orbital Gear is now available on Steam, and we had a chance to play around with that a little bit last night, and pretty fun game. I mean, it's simple enough that anybody can kind of jump in and run around, but it does take some practice to get hang of swinging around planets and the gravity and everything.
Yeah, I really love the movement mechanics in that game. Like, there's something nice and flowing. Like, even though it's easy to kind of wind up on a planet and lose your momentum and whatever, but it's just, I don't know, it's accessible. I think the movement at least.
Yeah.
But I actually thought it was launching as a Steam Early Access title, but it looks like it's a full release. It's still got some rough edges though. Had a couple of crashes when we were testing it, and also a weird case where you couldn't join or spectate. You just got sent back to the team selection screen.
Yeah, a little buggy yet, but it's playable.
Yeah, it's got a huge amount of potential, I think, and the devs seem pretty attentive, so I'm sure we'll see updates on that soon.
And there was an announcement about Borderlands. Their next pre-sequel game will have a Linux port. We weren't quite sure about that when that was first announced, but I guess IGN contacted them and they said that it was confirmed, so that'll be great.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that stuff like this isn't getting solidly announced, like that it shows up in public financial reports and that's the first thing that we hear about it.
Yeah, it's a little odd, but hey.
It's also interesting to see that coverage of a site like IGN and the kind of response that that's gotten.
Corbin's asking in text if they said they weren't going to, and what they were talking about was the original Borderlands, or maybe Borderlands 2, but
I think it was Borderlands 2.
Yeah, he hadn't yet commented on their next game, so that's cool that maybe that made an impact.
A Dungeon Keeper-like game called Dungeons is getting a sequel that will be coming to Linux. Supposedly this game is going to address some of the deficiencies that people who played the original one found. I mean, it's tricky to make a game that is like something that is so visible. Like, it's kind of like the Dwarf Fortress thing, you know? Like, if you make something that's like Dwarf Fortress, everybody will point out the ways that it is not Dwarf Fortress, you know? And so, yeah, everybody points out everything that is not Dungeon Keeper-like about this game, apparently. But supposedly this sequel is going to address many of those things.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm still looking forward to Divinity. I think that's the name of it. It's supposed to be coming out soon.
Yeah, I spotted a tweet yesterday, and I can't find it now, but saying that Linux is still being worked on, but no date coming up for that yet.
Oh, well, hopefully not too long.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because it seems to be something that people are excited about. Another game that John brought up yesterday was Active Aggression, which looks like a sort of modern-themed real-time strategy. It looks like it could be pretty neat. There's been a few Steam releases in the past couple of weeks. Anything that stands out to either of you lovely people as being exciting?
Nothing we haven't already talked about. It's cool to see that there's still, quite a few games coming out cross-platform.
Yeah, totally. We'd mentioned Crawl in a previous cast, which I kind of am excited to find some time to sit down with, but that's finally been released after the delays that they had a month or so ago. And the Maker's Eden, which we've mentioned a few times in previous casts, is out and about for people to play. A couple of days ago there was a new batch of Greenlight titles pushed out, and 28 of the 50 titles. It's interesting to see that number drop back to 50 again. I have Linux support, so it's a little bit over half.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
Rexora is a Portal mod that I'd previously come across by Mevius, the Portal modder that we mentioned earlier. Absolute Drift looks kind of sweet. It's this sort of minimalistic top-down stunt driving game, I guess. It's kind of like if Mirror's Edge and Trackmania were friends, maybe it'd look like that.
That sounds interesting.
I can hear all of your minds being blown. Again, nice to see good representation there. Ninja Pizza Girl is something that I'd come across previously as well. I think that's by an Australian developer. And looks like it apparently... I haven't played it firsthand, so I don't have any real first-hand experience there, but apparently the platforming is pretty solid and has some enjoyable mechanics.
Cool.
Yeah, looks interesting.
Oh yeah, someone in chat mentioned Screen Cheat which I had a chance to pick up and check out very recently. And it's a really interesting game. The idea is that you play split screen regardless of whether you're playing locally or online, and you can't see the other players in your own view. You have to look at their view to work out where they are.
Yeah, I picked up a key for that, but I tried to join a game and I could not find out how to actually start it, so I haven't been able to see how it works, but it sounds interesting.
Yeah. I had trouble. I think it's just that the UI is not very intuitive.
Yeah.
But once you get into a game, it's interesting. It needs a little bit of balancing, maybe. I played this. There's this kind of King of the Hill thing where the hill point moves around the map, and that way you creates more interesting gameplay than if everybody just camps in the same spots. But it's quite hectic, and for that, it's quite interesting. And there's a link in chat to sign up for the beta if anybody's interested. I think I got my beta key 3 or 4 days after signing up, so there's a little bit of a wait there. Oh, apparently it's instant now because the game is out, so there you go. And finally, touching on crowdfunding, I had the opportunity to beta test or test before release an upcoming point-and-click adventure called A Right from the Stars.
I don't think I've heard of that one. How's it look?
It's kind of cute and charming. It's this sort of 3 trials type format where you're a kid who's on the path to becoming a man in the tribe, and you've got to go through this sort of the challenge of wisdom and the challenge of courage and the challenge of treasure hunting. I can't remember what they were, but the 3 trials.
Nice.
And it's kind of fairly puzzle oriented, which is nice. The mechanics that they've got in the beta, in the demo. Sorry, there's a demo on the Kickstarter page. Is gives a bit of an idea for the type of gameplay. It feels like it's got rough edges, but still very early in development, so that's easy to look over. It's also on Steam Greenlight.
Cool.
Are there any other crowdfunding campaigns that you guys have come across in the past couple of weeks?
I thought I've seen a few, but they didn't look like games that were going to be, that big of an impact.
Yeah, I spotted. It's kind of another point-and-click game, because everybody knows how much I like those. Bolt Riley is having a second crowdfunding campaign, and this one is particularly interesting in that it's only running for 7 days. And it looks like it's going to meet its target. And it's just kind of interesting to see that approach with a much reduced target over the original one, and very interesting to see the different profile to pledge behavior when a campaign's condensed down into a week versus a month or 2 months, as is more common. But of course, that's probably more interesting to me than you guys.
I don't mind adventure games, I just haven't followed them.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But yeah, so that looks like it's well on the way to reaching its goal. So if anybody is interested in a reggae-themed point-and-click, totally get into it.
You have 12 hours.
Yeah, you've got 12 hours left, so by the time you hear this, it will well and truly be over. Sorry.
Yeah, but for those of you who are here now, listening live, you have 12 hours to jump on that reggae adventure point-and-click bandwagon, if that's your thing.
Excellent.
Well, I feel like maybe we accidentally told JP to bugger off before before we wanted him to go. But if it's you're still here, you can talk. If there's anything that you've seen, you can talk and eat at the same time. We don't mind. We're not proud.
Share your sandwichy wisdom.
Sandwich talk is the best talk.
If there's anything you're looking forward to, or anything new?
Anything on the crowdfunding front that you think might be interesting? It's all good. It's all good. Well, on that note, we might wrap up the show. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody who's listening, and of course, Mim and Namoda and JP for being around. It's been a pleasure.
And don't forget to jump in the event afterwards, and also our weekly Guns of Icarus event. We're always looking for new players that want to check it out.
Yeah, especially pilots. If anyone is keen on flying, hey, pilot, yeah.
Yeah, we try and make a comfortable environment for people to to get familiar with some of the game mechanics. So if anybody wants to try piloting and aren't feeling comfortable doing so, playing with other people within the community in a more safe space, we're always happy to set up a practice game to get that sort of stuff going before you have to deal with aggressive enemy ships.
It really is a very friendly environment. I would vouch for that. Everyone's very supportive and they don't mind that sometimes I'm a little bit poo at my job. That's fine.
That's cool. It's all a learning experience, regardless of whether you do well or poorly. But in general, the Guns of Icarus community is fairly, friendly in that regard. So yeah, on that note, we might wrap up.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. Yeah, JP was a cool guest. Yeah, if you're gonna hang around, we'll do two goodbyes at the end. Or actually, sorry, no, John likes us to record goodbyes now, so we can do that. So yeah, thanks heaps for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Have you heard of that, JP? Because it's got a little bit of also inspired by Spelunky and so forth. If you're still around.
Run off for a snack.
Oh well, that's all right.
Or he's very anti-necrodancer, maybe. No comment.
Yeah.